Welcome to today's episode of Move, Crush, Count. I'm your host, Scott Joseph. Today's episode is brought to you by J&L Marketing, a digital and direct marketing agency that helps you outsmart your competition so you don't have to outspend them. Do me a favor, visit www.jnlmarketing.com to see how their innovative approach will help you move the crowd, crush the competition, and count the money. Today's guest is Errol Doebler, a former Navy SEAL and founder of Leader 193. He has a leadership consulting firm. Errol's book, The Process, Art, and Science of Leadership, he provides a methodology there that helps any leader guide their team successfully in any environment. I had the privilege of listening and seeing him live at our Business Bourbon and Cigar event last week, and it was phenomenal. Today's episode, Errol and I are going to discuss the art and science of leading well. And he has extensive experience in leadership. He's worked with executives and teams with Fortune 100 companies, professional sports organizations, small tech startups, and individual executives across a vast array of industries around the world. So I want you to join us as we dive into Errol's insights on effective leadership, the process of leading well, and how it can be applied to your business and your personal needs. Welcome, Errol Doebler.
Be here. Oh, there it is. You got me on mute. You're already tricking me up. It's a pleasure to be. I'm doing great. I'm super excited to be here and dive in.
All right. So let's go right into it then. What inspired you to become, first off, I got to ask, what inspired you to become a Navy SEAL? And then how did that experience shape your leadership style?
Well, I wish I had a story like there's this huge lineage of, Navy SEALs in my family or military. There's not. I grew up next to some folks who went to the United States Naval Academy, where I ended up going to school. And one day they just came over with this pamphlet from the Naval Academy. I don't know why. And it was cool. And I looked through it, and I was probably 7th grade at the time. And there was this one very nebulous section about Navy SEALs. And it was just a picture of a bunch of guys in shorts just hanging out. And the description, again, was very nebulous. It didn't say a lot. It's not like today where you could learn everything you need to, right? This is back in 1980, 70, whatever. And I was like, man, these guys look pretty cool. I couldn't even explain why. Now, years go by. And I'm in high school, and I played lacrosse in high school. It was time to go to college. And, I told my coach, and he says, all right, well, where do you want to go? We'll call the coaches. We'll get them out here starting to recruit. And I didn't say Johns Hopkins, Syracuse, or, I just said the Naval Academy. He was like, okay. I don't know why I said the Naval Academy. Naval Academy came out, scouted me. I got in. And then once I was there, then obviously you continue to learn about it. And then it became an obsession. I will be a Navy SEAL. But I just think that pamphlet that I saw stuck in my mind. And, how that affected everything I did, just to get in was a challenge. But I've done a lot of stuff. With the Navy, I was on a ship before I was a Navy SEAL. I was in the FBI afterwards. Now I run my own business. But everything I come back to from a leadership perspective is based in Navy SEALs. It's just that's where the bulk and the meat and the substance of my leadership methodology came from. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. What inspired me? A picture and a really nebulous article. And then, that's how it's affected. It just affects every part of my life.
All right. So how many times, and you got to be brutally honest, how many times when you were going through the SEAL training, did you say to yourself, what the hell am I doing here?
Yeah. The answer is 0. And here's why. Because, so first of all, Navy SEAL training, BUDS is the acronym, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL. And, the stats are pretty well known. 70% of the people who go in will quit. It's a 6-month program, still widely regarded as the most difficult military training in the world. And here's what I found out, right? I had a very unique class, and this is going to sound like I'm talking about how I walked uphill both ways to school, but the facts are the facts. Our Hell Week, and Hell Week is pretty early in the training. It's like week 4 or 5. It was winter, so it took place in January, early February. So it's cold out in San Diego then, especially at night. It literally rained 4 of the 5 days, and it was a bit of a nightmare. We started the class with 200, finished the end of Hell Week with about 10. Okay, so people were quitting faster than you could keep count. It was just all day. Somebody would be quitting, the bells ringing. But here's what I found. Anybody who ever said, forget about thought, said the words out loud, man, I don't know about this, they quit. Whether it was that moment or 2 or 3 days later, they always quit. And the guys who were like, no, I will never quit. I don't care what they're going to do, what they do to me. I simply won't quit. So it's just what any attitude would be for somebody doing something where there's no other option. And when quitting,
so you couldn't allow yourself to go. If you were going to finish, you knew you couldn't allow yourself to go there mentally.
You just, couldn't do it. Yeah. Couldn't do it. And what I was worried about from Hell Week, because you're sleep deprived, right? It's the they told us we got about 3 hours of sleep during Hell Week. So it starts Sunday night, ends Friday afternoon.
For the whole week.
For the whole week, not per night. So I was worried that I was just going to be delirious and then wake up one morning in bed and somebody telling me you quit and not remember it. So what my strategy was for that was anytime I start to feel anything like, this is hard, my strategy was go find somebody else. Go find somebody else and help them. Because if I'm feeling it, I know for a fact somebody else is feeling it. And look, that's what leadership is anyway. But, and sure enough, if something was happening to me, it's midnight, we're freezing cold, I just go to the guy next to me and be like, hey, man, how you doing? You all right? He'd be like, thanks for asking. I'm not so good right now, but I think I'm okay now. Right. So, and that just took the pressure off.
Yeah, that's awesome. So walk us through your process for leading effectively. Yeah. Not necessarily in business. We'll get there. I'm talking about in combat situations.
Yep. Well, it's all the same. Okay. Because in my view, leadership is problem solving, right? Leaders solve problems. That's it. Big problems, small problems, right? How to scale, how to hire, right? How to reprimand, whatever it is, it's problem solving. And what I realized was the brain goes through a problem solving process regardless of the size of the challenge. It might be you saying, look, we've got to acquire this business, and that's going to give us 3,000 extra employees. How do we merge it to, I'm going to walk into the break room and see somebody I don't like, to, okay, we're getting off the helicopter and all of a sudden we've been ambushed and now the plan is out. And now the brain goes through the same process. There is an emotion which triggers an action. That action is typically intuitive, but it can be learned, which is part of the process. And however ill-conceived it may be, you formulate a plan, you execute, and at some point you reflect. That's it. And all I've done is break down each one of those elements. And the people I work with and the teams I work with, we hammer away at each element until it becomes second nature. Emotions, emotional awareness. We hammer away. What are you feeling? What are you feeling? What are you feeling? So it just becomes habit to know, how am I feeling? And then each element we continue to build on. That's the process. Simple as that.
How do you transfer that to the business world? And then what do you see as some of the problems or challenges that business leaders face in that transition? I'm sitting here thinking, and I'm going to eventually tie this back because, all right, if we're going to have a really serious business problem, probably the most serious business problem we've all faced in the last 10 years might have been those first few weeks in March 2020 and COVID. We'll come back to that in a second, right?
Yeah.
But let's go back to my question. How do you transfer those leadership skills that you have to do in life or death situations when, I mean, you could make the argument, and I'm sure I'm safe in saying it, that there's no business situation that should produce the same. It might feel it to the businessman, but I probably guarantee you until they get out there and the bullets are flying around or grenades and whatever else, There's no level of stress that's going to compare to that. So I would imagine whatever applies there can easily apply in business. But what are some of those challenges, and what is that transition, or what's that process look like?
So what I do is I start by telling stories. I tell combat stories. And the reason I tell combat stories is they're entertaining. People like to hear about them. But the real reason is combat is the ultimate expression of consequence, right? You do leadership wrong in combat, you get mission failure, injury, or death, all of which are unacceptable. Okay. So I'll go through a story, right? When I was at Business Bourbon and Cigars, right? I went through a story about how we were getting shot at. We were under friendly fire. The interpreter got scared. I had to snap him out of it to get moving, right? There's a lot to that, right? But then what I do is I show people, here are the elements of the process that I went through to get that guy back in the fight, okay? And so the behaviors are behaviors that can be applied anywhere, but they had nothing to do with war. But did the behaviors make us better warriors? Well, the answer is obviously yes, as you hear the story. So then I just pivot to, okay, here's the behaviors. Here was my thought process. We all agree that has nothing to do with war. It didn't have anything to do with shooting a gun or right making a tactical combat movement, but it made us better warriors. So reflect. If you gave these behaviors a try or this process a try in every aspect of your life, would you get better? And the answer is always yes. And now I've got people locked in. I've moved them past the very respectful, yeah, but nobody will die here, to, oh, I get it. It is all behavioral. So that's where I make the transition. And look, and I know nobody's physically going to die, but we have to work in context too. There are the death of reputations. There are the death of businesses. There are the death of relationships, and those things matter.
Yeah. I think every person, but every business, since we're a business podcast, every business leader, whether they want to admit it or not, has some level of limiting beliefs. We all have some level of empowering beliefs as well. So how can leaders do a better job identifying? Because some of them, I probably went through a period where I thought I had nothing but empowering beliefs. And then I look back and realize, I think once you reach a certain level of success, it's easy to overlook the fact that your comfort zone is just a lot bigger than what it used to be, but you've got limiting beliefs that are keeping you inside that comfort zone. Right. Yep. And so it's just a different level. And so how can you help leaders identify their limiting beliefs, and so they're able to lead more effectively?
Yep. So the beauty of my process, and again, this is going to sound like a series of shameless pitches by me, my process.
You wouldn't be the first on here.
I know, but the fact of the matter is, what I tell people and what has proven to be absolutely accurate, and I knew it would be, that little problem-solving brain process I just put you through, since that happens all the time, if there is a challenge, you will always find where it falls and the solution inside of one of those elements. So you're able to get to it quickly. Now, with the limiting beliefs, where does that fall? Well, remember I said there's a trigger, something happens, there's an emotion, and then there's an action, right? I call that phase of it cultural awareness and recognition. In my view, culture is made up of the things you do, not the labels you put on it, right? We could say we have a culture of excellence. That's great. But if you can't tell me the very specific things you do, the behaviors you exhibit to create excellence, then you don't have that. You just have a meaningless label. So what the beauty of my process is, I guide you through it, and my clients, teams, individuals come to this conclusion on their own. Now it's more powerful. I know where they need to go. I'll steer them there. So for example, limiting beliefs, that will be in the second week. Tell me the things you do. Well, I yelled at this person. I procrastinated on this thing. Whatever it is you did. Now we're going to break down why. Why did you behave that way? Why did you do that thing? If I keep asking why enough, eventually they're going to go, because I'm afraid if I don't do it that way, people won't respect me or people think that I'm less than. Boom, we've just hit it. Why do you feel that way? Okay, boom. Now we just said it. Now, and I said, what does that mean to you? Well, it means I don't have confidence and I'm afraid of getting things wrong because I'm afraid of the way people will think of me. That's a limiting belief somewhere, however we label it, but that's what it is.
Right.
Now the answer is fantastic. I can't tell you to stop believing that. My goal, my job is to get you to say it out loud. Because once you say it out loud, now it's on the front of your mind. And now you can start making decisions off of that, right? Okay, I have this limiting belief. I am fearful that if I make this hard decision and it goes wrong, people won't respect me. However, now I will decide how I want to behave. Next element of my process, guidelines for behavior. What is a behavior now that you want to really work on based on what you've seen? And now, as long as you are always thinking, that's how I intuitively want to act. I want to yell because I'm afraid, but that's not how I said I'm going to act. I'm going to have courage to make this decision. And that will be hard and it will feel fake at first. But now the brain starts to rewire itself. And the more you do that, the more you can increase the area of your comfort zone, right? I'm not telling you can't feel certain things. What I'm saying is you have to recognize them and then understand the intuitive action and then create the action you want. That's it.
You know what I love about what you just said is you came up with emotional limiting beliefs. And I think if you ask a lot of business leaders and why maybe they don't always recognize certain limiting beliefs is because a lot might define that term as a financial goal, a sales goal, a milestone that they're trying to get their business to, whatever it might be. And maybe they have belief. It's easier to identify the beliefs of saying, our company's not ready for that, or we're not big enough for that yet. And I think a lot of people, especially in business, go there instead of what you just said. And that's night and day different. But your process to get there is the same. But make no mistake about it, it is a limiting belief, because if you have that limiting belief, right, it is going to make you act a certain way, treat others a certain way, not do your best, keep it where it is, and limit your growth.
We saw that at your event, Business Bourbon Scars, right? You all did a masterful job of presenting a problem or a challenge to the group. And then, right, as it was industry specific at that point. And what I saw from my lane was people trying to solve a problem without understanding the underlying true limitation. And most of it came down to, we're either not committed to actually do this thing. And why are we not committed to do this thing? Because we're not sure how. And that makes us really afraid and insecure. That's it. Soon as I started,
and let me tell you, if we got in front of that room of the people that are in that room and said that, they would all deny it. They'd all deny it. So, and I want you to finish your thought, but I was just thinking, I feel like having a mastermind specific topic, maybe right out of the gate, and you and I discussed this yesterday, where literally maybe one of the breakout sessions is truly on a process, on how to actually do a process and become a better leader.
Right.
I think would be something extremely valuable.
It's invaluable. And that's why I'm able to, support me and my family through this, right? Because here's where I use my background. Okay. Former Navy SEAL, former FBI guy, terrorist guy, war guy, the whole thing. And I come out of the gate with understanding your emotions. I don't get a whole lot of giggling behind my back, right?
Yeah.
Rightfully so. Because if I can tell you, understanding your emotions while you're getting shot at is every bit as important as how well you shoot the weapon. Okay. And so transfer that. So when, back to the event, I didn't tell people, well, you're just afraid to do that. That's a limit. You got to be a little more delicate with what you're saying, but it's a series of why questions. Well, why aren't you committed? Well, because blah, blah, blah. Oh, well, why this? Why this? Okay, well, we're just not ready. Why aren't you ready? Because we don't train our people on it. Why don't you train your people? And now all of a sudden you're just saying it out loud. Say, okay, now you might have to start a little further to the left to get here. Like, okay, first we have to establish a little bit of courage, some priorities and commitment. And then we've got to get people trained up. That's going to take a little while. And once we do that, we can execute, right? So again, it's all the same, but I promise you, from a leadership standpoint, whether it's business or war or leading your family, that's going to be the initial issue. Always is. And if you can recognize it, not judge it, right? Because you may always be afraid, but as long as you're like, oh, I'm afraid right now, but now what? And what going forward?
All right, give us some specifics here. Share some examples of how you've helped leaders, business leaders, improve their communication in the team dynamic that they have.
So team communication comes down to, and that dynamic. Let me, I'll give you a great example. Okay. I worked with the NBA referees for a while. Okay. Great group. So they're a union and they have a five-person leadership council, if you will. So I work with those 5 people. And they really, all they really do is just do battle with the NBA over union stuff, right? What's our pay? What are our benefits? The whole thing. And the NBA is a gorilla, right? They're a behemoth. They can just ignore you to oblivion. So one day we're working together, right? And I'm bringing them through the process, and they're trying to work on some type of benefit for the union. I can't remember exactly what it was, and it's unimportant. And so I put them through the planning process, right? So we talk about communication, right? Communication, we're not talking about the soft skills that matter. We're talking about what are we actually going to be talking about? So when I say this acronym that I introduced to everybody, situation, mission, actions, contingencies, command, communication, all we talk about is those elements. That focuses our communication. We are all talking about the same thing. And if we go right or left, somebody can say, wait, is this related to our mission that we were talking about? Everybody can go, no, it's not. Back on point. That automatically makes communication amongst team members more dynamic and more focused and better, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Now, what's next? Right? How do we execute? So we're going through the planning process. They are doing a great job of really staying on point. So now their communication is very focused. It's very dynamic. And I say, guys, what's the one thing? Because they're giving me a plan. I'm looking through it. And I'm like, they're missing. I know what they're missing, but I've got to get them to say it. They say, guys, what's the one thing that prevents you from really getting these big ticket items for your membership from the NBA? And their answer was like, they all said at the same time, they'll ignore us. I said, okay, how often does that happen? Every time. I said, okay. So as we go through the elements of the planning process, that falls under contingencies. And I said, well, guys, what will you do when they ignore you? And they're like, right? So now, again, to your question, how do we create more energy, more synergy, right? We use the process, we stay with the process, and we understand it. So just to finish the story, now it's a whole new plan, right? We've got the general plan, but the real focus is on when they ignore us, what will we do? Because that is what's been stopping us. So we made a whole new plan, right? First thing, it's the phone call follow-up to the, whoever. Then it's then it's a phone call and an email. Then it's their lawyer sending something. And then it comes down to, this is your final notice. We'll be on strike this time in 48 hours if. Now, I said, all right, guys, that's all good. But what will you do if you get to the strike part? Are you ready? Well, yeah, the whole thing. I said, okay, let's rock and roll. So they submit the thing, right? Clockwork. Ignored. ignored. First thing. Second thing, lawyer sends a warning. Okay. It's all going. And they're getting pretty excited. Like, it's working. I go, it's not working, guys. You're going to get to the final one. Is everybody ready? Oh, yeah. Final one hits. And now there's panic. We can't strike the whole thing, right? They call me in. Errol, we got to change it up. I said, guys, you do whatever you want. I just asked, how committed were you to this? And you all said you were committed. And we went through that, right? They just needed a little assurance. What happens next? There it is. The final letter says, if this time and at whatever time we don't get a response or whatever, we'll be on strike. Hey, the commissioner, right on the phone. Hey, guys, whoa, everybody slow down. Come on in. Let's talk about this. My point is, that's a very specific example how following this problem-solving process, how following the elements of the planning process that we used in the SEAL teams, I just kind of modified it and simplified it. Automatic dynamic. If you are operating in a certain way every time, communication becomes more dynamic, problems get solved faster.
I love that example because how many times, and you could take it through every level of business. How many times has businesses are great at coming up with strategies and plans? The one. Rarely does everything go as planned. And then, like David Spizak, our friend that you met out in San Antonio, then you're building the rocket ship after it's already taken off.
That's right.
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 And that's a bad spot to be in. But just think about, wow, if you're a business leader and you've got this strategy, you've got this huge goal that you're going after, and you've got a good strategy in place, inevitably something's going to go wrong. Maybe you lose a couple key people. Maybe it's a certain element, whether it's a product or an element of your segment of your sales team isn't hitting the numbers that they need to do, whatever it might be.
Yep.
There's always got to be contingencies, and rarely does a business plan for contingencies, even in a sales process.
Yeah.
When you could take this through a sales process all day long, because the sales process, it's about, all right, we've got our pitch. We pitched it. Then we're trying to close. They either say yes, no, and a large percentage might not give us a yes or no. And when that happens, the only plan is we'll follow up.
Right.
But it's not specific. It's not like what you're talking about. Well, because there's different ways to follow up based on the responses, right?
I'll give you a perfect example on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Salespeople, right? I was a salesperson.
Yeah.
In between the SEAL teams and the FBI, I was in sales. I sold copiers. The Vietnam of sales. You could sell a copier, you could sell anything, right? So it was a battle. And so, I was able to take some at least personal experience. But when I work with sales teams, I just go in there, I'll figure it out. I've been doing this a long time. I'm like, great, fantastic. I just have one question. Can we do a quick role play? Role play is not my thing. I'm like, just humor me. Yeah. Okay. You walk in and I am the director of operations and I tell you the CEO is not going to be here. The buyer is not going to be here, like he said. You thought you were going in to close. Buyer's not there. And we say, we'll get back to you. What are you going to do? Well, we'll follow up with you. I'm like, oh, that's a good contingency plan. That's it. Honest to God, that's what they say. So yes, from a sales process, my methodology can be incorporated in any sale, right? We had the 8-step sales process, whatever it was, and it was good. You follow it, but you still have to have certain behaviors and you still have to prepare for each thing. And contingency, there's two things that I find where I make adjustments with individuals or organizations. It's either lack of clarity for a mission, right? Or no contingency planning. Ultimately, contingency planning will be the lifeblood of your organization. Here's the general plan. What will we do if? Why?
Yeah.
Because it sets your mind in a place where you don't get thrown off if there's something that goes wrong. You've already thought about some things that can go wrong. Well, what happens if something goes wrong that we didn't think about? All you have is a new situation. set of circumstances dictating a need for action. You just go back to the beginning of the planning process. It's foolproof. But the organizations that don't consider contingencies at all, when that one thing goes wrong, they freeze up.
Yep.
And either they screw something up going on or they just now ignore it. But the ones that say, okay, we'll think of things that can go wrong. Oh, this thing went wrong. Oh, that's not what we thought of, but we know how to execute going forward.
We had back when COVID struck, you and I were introduced by Sandy Cerami, good friend of both of ours. And when COVID struck, there was a lot of uncertainty, a little bit of panic, a lot of either furloughing, laying off, skeleton crew stuff, at least in the dealership world. And I know a lot of other businesses as well. And Sandy and I put together a weekly call to kind of go through this. And everybody had their one plan, except for one guy, Adam Aarons. And it was the first time I had heard anyone articulate this in business. He had 3 different plans. So he didn't keep taking it further, but he did come up with 3 different levels. And he basically said, this is our plan A. And if this happens, this is what we're going to do. But if this happens, we're going here. And if this happens, we're going here. So he had 3 different strategies based on potentially what he felt could happen out of this. Out of all the dealers, out of all the general managers, any of the business leaders, he's the only one I know of that planned that thoroughly.
Mm-hmm. And I bet you
I have to tell you, he did. Well, all the car dealers did.
Okay.
however, I'm exposed to a lot of different businesses. And that's one of the luxuries of doing this podcast is not only hopefully are we helping a lot of business leaders learn, but, I learn just as much as our audience because I'm talking and interviewing so many great people. And I have to tell you, there are not a lot of businesses that go to that level of planning and have contingency stuff, especially throughout their process.
Yep.
They all have processes, and then inevitably what ends up happening is there's a part of the process that breaks down. If they're a good business, they start root causing those issues that come up most frequently, and then they try to remove them. As time goes on, they do, they start root causing and doing, they bring up the issue, they discuss it and come up with solutions, right? Change the process, hope they've eliminated that, and they work their way down through the barriers or the issues. God, it would be nice to have, how long does it take? Because if I'm a business leader listening to this, right? Well, first off, some aren't that great at developing processes. They don't understand the actual science behind it. However, let's just say they are. Not everybody still takes it to this level. And a lot of them might be like, I don't have time to do that. It's easier for me to put it out there. Let's see what's working, what's not, and then quickly adjust. What do you say to those people? And then how long does it typically take to plan effectively?
Yeah, a couple of good points there. And I want to close with some COVID examples, right? But first and foremost, when a leader says to me, Errol, I like what you got going. I just don't have time to commit to this. I said, no problem. You don't have time to commit to your leadership, which everybody will agree is the most important thing that you'll do as a leader, your leadership. Right. It pauses people when I say that because it's so obvious. Like, you don't have time to commit to being a better leader. I'm not really sure I understand that. And I don't. I use that obvious thing to snap people back in. The ones who say, yeah, well, I get what you're saying, but when I figure out these problems and I have more time, I'll come back to you.
It's always a time.
Yeah, I've gotten to the point now where I'm like, great, see you never. Because if that's really what you're saying to me, when you fix all these problems you're created without thinking about your leadership, you'll get back to me. I'll never see you. Good luck.
Yeah.
And that's 100%. Then somebody goes, well, gosh darn, you know what? You're right. Okay. So that's the first area we get to. And it's never the money. It is never the money. It is always the time commitment. It will always come down to commitment. At your event, right? Bo Bozark, right? That guy and his team were amazing. And they brought it down to the essence every time.
Yeah.
Whatever issue it was, if you are not wholly committed to it, you will not solve it. Okay.
The Bozard group is definitely committed. Gosh, they run very well.
They're committed to what they say they're going to be committed to.
That's
we
right.
need to fix this digital F&I, right? That was one of the things. I didn't know what any of that was. But then when they got up, his team got up and we're like, well, here's what we're doing. And we're not getting it right just yet, but we're getting better. And we continue to pour resources into training and figuring it out. Full commitment. Same thing with leadership. We talk about standardizing the way we do things. My response is, why not standardize the way you do leadership, right? I'm giving you a standardized process that
give us an example. Give us an example. Like I know we're talking about that, but you just said it differently. And I think sometimes the audience might be listening and they're getting it right. And then you say this and they're like, oh, it's a different way to look at that. Right. So I love that comment.
What's that? Standardizing your leadership?
Yeah. Yes.
So my best clients now use Leader 193 Way is what we call it now. We will be doing a full rebrand in a couple of weeks, but the process stays the same. Yeah. They use this from soup to nuts, right? Initially, I would start with the CEO. He's like, gosh, this is great. I'm going to have my next level get down to it. The next level beneath the CEO says, I've got another level, but will this work for the individual contributors? I walk them through, tell them, remind them it's just a problem-solving process. They still have to, oh, yeah. So now they're all going through it. It's to the point now where everybody is communicating in one way based on the elements of this process. Wait a second. Is that what our culture is? Is that how we said we were going to do business? It's not. Let's refocus. Wait a second. When I never saw this plan, what are we executing on right now? We said we plan before we act. You're right. What's the mission? Everybody is speaking a same standardized leadership language. Now, when they bring people in, okay, they hire based on the culture that they established through my process, right? Obviously, they've got to talk about widget specific stuff, right? We can't hire an electrician to, I don't know, do whatever, something else that an electrician does, right? So there's got to be widget stuff, but then they talk about culture. Hey, here's what our culture is here. We prioritize, we always plan, and we commit aggressively, right? Always in context. What do you think about that? There are people who are interviewing who will say things like, oh, I don't really spend time planning. I wing it. Cool. And I'm sure you're great. You just won't be a good fit here because that's not how we do it, right? That is standardizing a leadership process. How do we fire? How do we promote? How do we differentiate the two people who have kind of technically done the same output on their widget? Well, we say, how have you best exhibited the values of our organization? Can you give me specific examples? That is standardizing your leadership processes. That is standardizing your language with nothing but flexibility in between, because you can change it. You know what? This isn't working anymore. Let's adjust. And that was the COVID thing. My clients during COVID, right? And I had this set up before COVID. So I was lucky. I didn't really have to pivot too much. But they would say, okay, Errol, we got to change everything. All right. So hold on now. Let's settle down. What exactly are you going to change? And it'd just be some random things. I said, that's fine. I said, but trust the culture you built, right? And I picked up prioritize, plan before we do anything, and commit with aggression. That was one particular company. Before COVID, right? We put them through the paces. They said, you know what, based on what we're seeing, we need these cultural behaviors. They were in context, right? So they came up with them. And I said, look, my point to them was, it doesn't matter what changes you have to make. As long as you prioritize the things you need to do. Look, if you have to lay people off, you have to lay people off. I don't know. I can't tell you about that. But what I can say is laying people off a bigger priority than doing this for the customer, right? Just throw it
Yep.
out there. Well, no, it's not, but we think we might have to lay people out. Like, oh, that's not what I said. What's the priority? Well, the priority is this thing with the customer. Okay, well, trust your culture, right? What's the plan to, and on it went, right? So COVID, my best customers stayed true to the culture. They pivoted where they need to, they planned, but they behaved like they said they were going to behave. And that allowed them to address each crazy thing that happened very unemotionally and methodically. Okay. Now, the companies that I had just started working with, okay, they were like, we got to put this on hold because we got to figure things out. I'm like, slow down.
Right when you need it the most.
This is when we need it. Okay. And to their credit, and I had a handful of them, to their credit, they were like, you're right. Because what they didn't have was a culture to fall back on. What they didn't have was a leadership process to fall back on. And they realized, you know what? Even though this is building the plane while we're flying it, at least we're building it. Okay.
Yeah. It's interesting you say this is leadership culture, the standardized process to fall back on.
Yep.
A lot of the people I interview, a lot of highly successful people, and a lot of them have their own personal mission statements, and they will tell me to a person, in order for me to accomplish this mission, all right, my personal mission, whatever it might be for that person, I have to prioritize my actions to make sure. And that's not always easy for very successful people because they're getting thrown opportunities. New ideas are coming at them left and right. And some of these guys, myself included, everything sounds great, like, because you want to be part of everything, right?
Yep.
But that's not, listen, the most successful people quickly identify and say, listen, this is not part of my mission. All right. This is not why I'm here. It's not going to help me. It's not going to be fulfilling for me. And it's not going to help me achieve my true purpose here. Right. And that's how they prioritize those actions. And basically you're saying the exact same thing, except you're taken to a business level.
Yeah. And here's the beauty of it, right? Because all that is the process.
Correct.
Right? People will say, I'll say, why'd you do what you just did? I've been doing this for 20 years and it's just intuitive to me. It just makes sense. So I go, that's great. And that's working for you. But as the leader, it's also your responsibility to train your people. Okay. And how can you train your intuition? Well, they should just be able to see what I do. No, they shouldn't. They shouldn't. Why should they understand? If you can't explain your intuition, you are winging it. Okay.
Yeah.
That's it. If you can't explain where things went right, what the repeatable process is, then you're not being a leader. That's for sure. And the other thing, the other beauty about this process, even your example, a million different things. And you, Scott Joseph, may I have identified 3 things. These are 3 great opportunities I'm going to jump on. These are my priorities. Fantastic. And all of a sudden something else pops in and you go, huh? You are allowed to say, I am shifting my priorities.
Yeah. And that's where the flexibility comes in that you mentioned.
As long as you're thinking mission, as long as you're thinking behavior, priorities, it can change up. It's allowed.
Yep. You kind of answered my next question, but let me ask you this. How do you ensure, we talked a lot last week about accountability. How do you ensure that your team stays aligned with the goals? And you could take this either through combat or in the business world, their goals and objectives, especially when things start getting fast-paced, crunch time, high stress type situations, right? Combat, that's an easy visual to kind of imagine. In business, you could be running up on deadlines where you got to get a lot of stuff done. Maybe you're getting towards the end of a month, a quarter, a year, and your sales aren't where they need to be. It's a variety of situations.
Yep. Yeah. So when we talk about culture, it's a very, people throw it around, and people threw it around at Business Bourbon and Cigars. Well, the culture, and I would stop and go, well, what is the culture?
Yeah.
Well, and they'll wing some great answer. I'll go, great. I go, that person over there works with you, right? Yeah. If I go ask them what the culture is, will they say the same thing? Well, no. Okay, then you don't have a culture. You're winging it. Okay. My point is, when people work with me, the culture is the bedrock. The behaviors are the bedrock. We go through a painstaking process for the business owner, whoever it is, to establish what they want the culture to be. Okay. Everything then, praise, reprimand, hire, fire, promote, demote, is going to be based by and large on those behaviors. What do I mean by that? I'll take you away. So when I had my platoon, we had identified few different things that we do. And most SEAL platoons do this, but these were specific to us. Unemotional and methodical, right? There is plenty of emotion to go around. We don't need to add to that fire. We need to recognize emotions and then act in an unemotional, methodical way. When we act, we need to prioritize, and we need to brutally prioritize the things we do. I gave an example of an ambush. You have to prioritize whether you fight the fight or save your friends who are being shot. And that has to be an unemotional, methodical thing. And you have to prioritize, and ultimately you have to prioritize winning the fight. Okay. And the next thing was, we plan with precision for everything we do, and then we act aggressively. Now, that was our culture. So we would get a week off here and there, right, to get some administrative work done, maintain our gear, so on and so forth. And we've got, a platoon hut. And I'll walk in the platoon hut, and everybody will be sitting around BSing, and that's cool, except that's not how we do business. We prioritize and we execute, okay? So I'll walk in, and I'll say, I'm not sure where this was on the priority list. And everybody will go and get up and start doing their stuff. That's it. I didn't say, come on, get out there and maintain your, I just said a behavior. I go, I'm not sure I remember this on the priority list. Everybody knew exactly what I meant, okay? Everything we did was based in a behavior, right? We get a couple guys start bickering over some nonsense about maintenance or who's going to do what, and they'll get heated. And I'll just walk up and I'll go, so this is how we decided we do business here? Unemotional and methodical. Okay, that's not what this is. This is two little babies crying over something stupid. Okay, so
you're making it less personal. You're making it, I love it. You're making it less personal. You're just bringing it right back to the culture and your policies.
How we do business.
It's how we do business. Yeah.
We all agreed how we do business. This is how we do business. Okay. Yeah. And I will just bring up the culture when things aren't getting done correctly. And now, how does everybody know that? Because it is literally part of our language. Yeah. It's how we communicate with each other. It's when we're out in the field and we say, hey, we have to make a reaction to this pretty quickly and we have to do it aggressively. I'm not worried about that. Where's the quick plan? If you have 10 seconds to throw out the plan, you better take that 10 seconds and plan, because that's how we do business. So how do we make that stick? How do we make it what it is? It's the leader's job to formally remind people. We would get together every couple of weeks. All right, look, let's talk about, are we living our culture? Where did we, where didn't we? We're talking about the culture, okay? Informally, every day. I just gave you those examples. Just walking up. They would be doing their work and just lollygagging. Right? Because the beauty of the SEAL teams is very flexible, right? If we're off for a week to do admin and maintenance, get your admin and maintenance done and let's hit the bar. Right? Let's go have some fun, boys, because we've earned it. And I would say, this sure looks like aggression to me, getting this done. I guess everybody wants to be here till 5:00. Again, all I did was brought up a culture. No matter what we do it aggressively we get it done. Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, you always have to be saying it as a leader. It literally has to become your language.
So you kind of addressed this a little bit earlier with the limiting belief about how people viewed people, how some worrying about you. You gave an example of a leader who deep down had concerns on how he was viewed.
Yep.
So, what are some strategies? You're holding people accountable. You've given some great examples right there. What are some strategies for building trust and rapport with team members?
So trust and rapport is, here's what I think about trust. First of all, trust is a consistent behavior. If you are acting consistently across the board, right, giving a good, honest effort to act consistently, I'm going to trust you. I may not like what you do or one of your cultural behaviors, right, guidelines for behavior that you, the boss, put out there. But if you are exhibiting it consistently, I will accept it. And then I can make a decision. Well, I don't like it, I'll leave. Or, okay, I know it's going to be this way. Let me get on board. That builds trust. The consistency of how you do business as a leader builds trust, rapport. So every leader wants to build rapport with their people. And that's good. Okay. And okay, so I'm gonna do my rounds around the office and say hello to everybody. Ask how the dog is doing. How's Julie and Bobby, the kids, right? They're still playing softball. That's all well and good. Okay, I'm not telling you not to do that. But what I am telling you is there are more effective ways to build rapport, because when people go to work, what do they want? FaceTime with the boss and telling the boss how you're kicking ass at work is really what people kind of want, right? So if I'm a boss and I go by and I say, hey, Scott, I go, how's that thing you're working on? The mission, right? The mission was to do this. Walk me through how that's going. And now I am asking you something very personal about your work and how you're affecting it and how you're kicking ass and how you're using the process. And I am literally having a meaningful conversation with the boss. And I go, man, that is on point. That is on. Hey, let me ask you a couple questions. What are you going to do if this happens? What are you going to do if that happens? Have you thought about those things? And now I'm engaging in dialogue.
And you're doing all the contingency stuff.
All the contingencies. And it might sound like, well, can't you talk about something good? But what do you want when you're at work? And now I walk away. Scott, you're going to be like, that guy is awesome. Awesome. If I go ask about your dog, you'd be like, yeah, my dog's great. But, can you listen? I'm trying to get your ear on this thing I'm working on, and I can't. But now you're asking me about my dog? Come on. So what are we talking to our people about? Are we engaged enough to be able to talk to them about what they're doing? Okay. I know it sounds very robotic, but look, that's what I think. Okay. And then at the end, ask how the wife and kids are. They're like, oh yeah, they're great. But whatever. That's what I think. I think the consistency in behavior, you establish behaviors, culture, you live them, you are consistent with them, that builds trust. Rapport, what are you talking to them about? Are you asking them to explain the things that are most important to them at work? Are you giving them a platform to tell them how awesome they are, or a platform to say, I'm struggling, boss. I need a little help with this thing. Oh, why do you need help? What's the mission? What have you done? Now we're having a meaningful. So, look, there's a million other ways, but, we got a few minutes left, maybe. Those are the two things that I think about: trust and rapport.
As you look at businesses going from the C-suite all the way down, entry-level positions, it's very easy to get pulled in a lot of different directions. The business leader's getting pulled in a lot of different directions because either got to handle a lot of situations, there's other opportunity, whatever it might be. Entry-level positions get pulled in a lot of positions because a lot of times they get, hey, can you do this? Can you do this? I need you to do this. That might sometimes be outside their scope. What are some exercises or techniques that you could advise people on that to help with their focus and or decision-making skills?
Yeah. So it still comes down to, first of all, focus is a behavior. Okay. So what we have to first do is we have to be aware of how we're behaving, right? This cultural awareness and recognition. We have to be so in tune with how we're behaving versus how we want to behave. Then you will say, I'm not being focused. And I know I need to be focused.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. It's recognizing where you are, being honest with yourself, not making excuses, and then putting in the effort, making a plan to say, I will be more focused. Okay. The decision-making skills. Okay. That decision-making is planning, right? How do I make a better plan? Okay. I'll bring you briefly through the first couple elements of this planning process, the acronym SMAC that I talked about. Situation, set of circumstances dictating a need for action. Okay. If I'm looking at somebody comes in and says, oh my God, boss, our competitor just moved across the street from us. We got to do something about this. Set of circumstances dictating a need for action. I might say, why do we need to do something about that? We don't care. We already have how we're doing business. We're good, right? That is an important element in decision making, whether
Right.
to even do anything. Okay.
That's right.
It's how often are we doing stuff and we don't need to be doing that stuff. Okay.
No decision is a decision.
It is a decision, but unless you look at it and go, well, what just happened? Why do we need to do anything at all? Now, as far as decision making, that's the first part, right? Do we need to do anything? That is my decision. Next part, mission. Okay, we do need to do something. What? What do we need to accomplish? And you can have 4 different missions, okay, but they've got to be separated out. You can't put them all in one big run-on sentence because then nobody knows what they're working on. All right. Well, the first thing we need to do is with that competitor, we need to demolish that building. That's the first thing. So they can't, whatever it is, but have a mission. Okay. Clearly defined mission based on an understanding of why you need to act. Then we could, some other day, maybe we'll go through the rest, but those are the first 2 elements.
Yeah.
You don't have those and you just start doing stuff. It's random and your results will be random.
So I follow you on Instagram. I know that I feel like every morning I'm seeing you going out into what looks like about a foot of snow and ice. You're chopping up, you got that big tub, you're chopping up the frozen water into big things of ice. And then I'm seeing you dip down into it. Usually I'm in like a robe and something real warm watching it. Talk to me about that.
I don't need to know any more than that, Scott, but okay.
Hey, I'll tell you what I do. I do the cold showers. And I have to tell you, other than the initial walk-in, I don't like a hot shower anymore. I like it while it's happening, but when I'm done, I don't like the way I feel. Mm-hmm. The cold shower, when I'm done, it is a night and day difference. And so I have been doing the cold showers. So I could see myself getting there, but you're doing the tub. And a lot of people are doing this now. Yep. So, I mean, this is not and I know there's talk to us about the benefits, not just physically, but mentally, what goes through that. And by the way, I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time. We're coming up on an hour.
I'm good.
I've got one more question after this. If that's all right.
No, I'm good. I'm good. Let's go. Cause this is why you have me on. So, all right. So when I talk about process, when I bring people through what I call the Leader 193 way, to be rebranded soon. But that being said, okay, it is process and wellness. I teach you a process, which we've just spent the last hour generally talking about, and wellness. Now, with my background, people are like, oh, then Errol's going to tell you to do your push-ups so you can wellness. No. I talk about the physiological wellness, okay, of the body, of the brain. Where do I, and what methodology do I use? Primarily, I use cold exposure and this Wim Hof method, cold exposure and breathing, very unique. But Let's talk about physiological as far as the wellness portion goes. When I get into the ice bath, and everything I'm saying is now based on scientific studies, this is no longer speculation. Okay.
Correct.
I get in, what happens? I get into a fight or flight mode, right? Right? That activates my nervous system. Okay. And what happens to all my, my organs? They start to constrict, my blood vessels constrict, all sorts of things are happening. Okay. Now, when I get you through an ice bath, I teach you in the middle of it to go from to, okay. You are now bringing your nervous system to the rest and digest. You have voluntarily activated and deactivated your nervous system. Okay. By continuum, your innate immune system, because that's all attached to the same thing. When you exercise your physiology in this way, okay, everything becomes stronger. Your blood vessels become stronger, okay, because now the blood can flow through them more easily. The heart doesn't work as hard. You get to exercise because you've expanded and contracted your organs. You've exercised them. They're not just sitting there dormant. So this is kind of the COVID thing too, right? COVID was real. People died. And that's where we've left it. It was a virus. If you remember, it was originally the novel coronavirus, the new virus, the virus that we haven't seen yet. It was still just a virus. Okay. Why were people dying? People were dying because when this new virus entered their system, their immune system was weak. Therefore, it overreacted, and that led to the death of people. Why was it weak? Because we have so many comorbidities, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, all these things. Okay, now, so when we exercise our physiology in this way, okay, by the way, the endorphins and the things that happen to your spirit, it increases them by like a factor of 10, like 500%. So now your mental clarity is better. Your mood is better. When you do these things, this wellness portion, now you are clear of mind, sound of body internally, right? You're not getting knocked down by every virus or germ that comes. You can now concentrate more effectively on the leadership process because you're not thinking about how am I going to get through this day because I got this stuffy nose and I got this thing. You're not in survival mode. That's the first thing, right? That I couldn't have painted with a broader brush. But that's the wellness portion, the physiological portion. Let's talk about the mental and emotional portion of that. We talk about how do you react under stress, right? Go to what you know under stress. Well, what do you know? Well, if I get you the ice bath is nothing more than an induced panic attack. That's all it is. It's the same thing you feel when you feel stress at work, just on steroids.
Right.
So if you now realize that there is a process to go through to calm yourself down in a bucket of ice, right? To reset your nervous system to go to rest and digest simply by doing this and not letting the outside elements affect you. Like, oh, it's so cold. Oh, how much longer am I going to be here? Oh, my fingertips hurt. No, you're like, yeah, all that's happening. Focus on my breath because I know physiologically, if I inhale through my nose long and deep, and I do a nice exhale in a calm fashion that activates the vagus nerve that serves to calm me down. Now I'm good. How is that not one of the greatest tools in the world for learning how to deal with stress? Can I share a quick story with you in practice? Okay, so I've started my business. I'm in Philadelphia, right? I get to everywhere I am early. It's just what I do. So I always have a book. And I'm in a coffee shop before my meeting. And I'm reading a book called Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. It's a good book. But it starts with this pilot named Johnny Bravo. And it's going through all he was flying down and he was in a canyon and he was going under the clouds. And he was supporting special operators. Basically everything that I've been through, I could relate with. I'm like, oh, and I even knew where they were based on the description. I'm like, I know where they are. They're in the KG Pass. They're going from Afghanistan to Pakistan to pick a fight. And I've been to that area of the cloud cover. I was just enjoying the story, right? And as I'm looking down, I'm starting to notice that the pages of my book are soaking wet. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I realize I'm shaking. I'm having a panic attack because obviously something is triggering me.
Right.
So what do? Then I have kind of a double dip, right? I've got like, oh my God, I'm having a panic attack. So I start to do a double panic. Okay. This is a true story. So I said, okay, wait a second. This is what I said to myself in a matter of seconds. All right, wait a second. I'm having a panic attack. This is what an ice bath is. What do I do in an ice bath to calm down? I took 2 deep breaths. I was fine. Went to my meeting, all good, right? Come home, I tell my wife what happened. She says, well, do you think you need to see somebody? You think this is now like this PTSD thing? And I said, it might be. And I said, I'm always happy to go see somebody, and I will. I'll go see anybody. You want me to talk to you about my problems? Pull up a chair. I'm ready. Okay. So I've got no problem with that. And I said, but if I go see somebody, what are they ultimately going to try to want to do for me? They're going to want to show me how to get past the panic attacks. And they're going to try to give me a pill. And I'm not taking a pill. I think I just did it. Now, as we know, our wives are generally right. And they are. That's not even just being this, fake humble guy. My wife is pretty much always right. And we're having a discussion. I'm usually like, God damn it. Okay. Even she had to go, you might be right about this. You might be right. She said, can we keep an eye on it? I said, of course we keep an eye on it. That was, I know when that was. That was in 2017. I haven't had an incident like that since. So again, what does this wellness, this cold exposure do for us? There's a reason you feel the way you feel when you get out of the cold shower. There's a reason I can take any stressful situation, no matter what it is, and go, because I practice it in an ice bath. That's the essence of why I use cold exposure and this other breathing technique, which we don't need to get into now. But that's why I use it. It helps you with your emotional awareness. Oh my God, I feel right? That's how you practice emotional awareness. It's how you practice an established behavior. It's how you learn to calm down in the midst of chaos. And it's how you get your physiology well. So you are not worried about your health all the time and this nagging thing you got going. You can focus on being a leader. Does that make sense? Or did I go off at a different? All right.
No, it makes perfect sense. I love it. That's I was hoping I'd get an explanation in like that. You met my wife Trish last week. I keep trying to get her to do the cold shower, and today she said, literally coincidence. She goes, today I got in the shower and I didn't have it hot enough. It was lukewarm and I didn't realize it. And I got in and I was like, oh no, this is horrible. So I will never get her there.
Yeah. Well, you'd be surprised. As a matter of fact, Leader 193 offers its open retreat event series where we teach people how to do just this. So there it is. There's the shameless pitch.
Listen, if you could get my wife to do that,
guaranteed.
All right, I can promise you this, you're not charging. If you're able to convince her to do that, you are not charging enough. That's what I can tell you. All right. Guaranteed. No matter what number it is.
Guaranteed I could get her in and get her to love it. 100%.
All right. So what do you believe, if we had to summarize today, what are some key takeaways or action steps that the audience can implement to become better leaders?
Yep.
Whether it's in their own lives or taken back to their organizations?
I would say 3 things to work on.
All right.
First and foremost, awareness. Awareness of what's happening around you with complete honesty, right? Complete objectivity and honesty and courage, right? Because you have to have that, whether it's yourself or your organization, okay? And start identifying the warts. It's good to pat ourselves on the back. We do all these things good. I got it, okay? But we make the adjustments, right? We are successful in spite of many things that we do. Let's be honest and point those out, because then that gives us the basis for targeted improvement. So that's the first thing, awareness, without judgment. Don't try not to be too hard on yourself. Then establish your culture, okay? Because that's ultimately what it's going to be, right? You are going to say, I don't like these things I just am doing that we're doing. Our culture is going to make sure we prevent these things by behaving in these ways. And it might very well just be the opposite of what you observe, but then live the culture. Be aware, identify the culture that you want, you have to live it, and then in everything you do, plan. Make a plan.
Yeah, and you're combining 2 and 3 when you talk about addressing that and bringing up holding people accountable and the way you did it. I love that. So I don't know what the timestamp was on this for that, but hopefully we can bring that up when we put it on the website, because to me, that's just a much easier way to hold people accountable and do it in a respectful way that's not going to upset anybody. And it also at the same time reinforces the culture, and so you're living that's what you mean by living it.
That's it. You can't hold someone accountable if they don't know what they're supposed to be accountable for. You have to make it clear that this is the way we do business. So when people say, well, I had to let that person go because they're not a cultural fit. So well, what's your culture? What didn't they fit? Well, ultimately it's just I just didn't like them. All right, well, that's that's not going to get it done, but okay, I got you. So yeah.
Errol, I appreciate it. So that's a wrap for today's episode of Move, Crush, Count, where we discuss the art and science of leading well with Navy SEAL Errol Doebler. Errol shared how to lead effectively in any environment and the process that can be followed to achieve success. I hope this episode gave you some valuable takeaways that you can apply to your own leadership roles, both professionally and personally. I also want to thank Errol for joining us today, sharing his expertise. It's always good talking to you. I know the MCC community appreciates it. You can learn more from Errol and his leadership consulting firm, Leader 193, by visiting leader193.com. Now, you're only going to be able to do that for about the next 30 days. Let me get you, if you're watching us, he's rebranding. It's going to be the same content, he's going to be teaching the same stuff, but it's going to be called Ice Cold Leader. But so reach out to him here before the next 30 days. So that way, when all that happens, you'll have the new website and everything else from him. So are you releasing a new book with it as well? Or
yeah. So what we're going to do a second edition of the book. And there's a reason why we're doing the second edition of the book. And very quickly, what I found out after I wrote that book was that I was diagnosed with severe traumatic brain injury. And ultimately, what my doctor said was, he said, your brain injuries, he said, at best, you should be in a very dark place in your life. He goes, at worst, you should be one of those 22 veterans a day who's committed suicide. That's how serious your injuries are.
Oh, wow.
He literally said, walk me through this process and walk me through this cold thing. And I walked him through awareness of every single thing I'm doing, from emotions to actions to blah, blah, and then the cold exposure to clear my mind so I could focus on that. He said, you literally saved your life. He goes, that's it. You saved your own life with that. I got this treatment, which is essentially insulin and some stem cells dripped into my brain. My brain exploded with energy, and I became healed. And he said, I've never seen anything like that before. I said, why do you account for that healing? He said, the same thing that saved your life. He said, you had put in place this process. And he said, your mind, body, and soul were so ready to be healed. They were thirsting for it. Once we gave it that one catalyst, it exploded. So my point is, we're gonna do a second edition of the book, and that's going to be it. What were the injuries? Good, fun stories. But here's the process, and here's now a real life way it saved a life. So if it did that, you can consider it perhaps as you move forward. So second edition, we're going to rename it, right? Ice Cold Leader, the whole thing. So
I love it. And I think that story is incredible. The one you just told. So hopefully people have listened all the way through this episode and got that. Listen, you're going to laugh at me, and it reminds me of another thing that came up last week. So, when I get in this shower, which I know pales in comparison to what you do,
you got to start somewhere.
But listen, when I get in, I know what you're talking about when you're like, because when you first step into that thing, it's cold. And I'm like, man, this is, and I have to, all right, calm down and breathe through this. And so I do it. But it reminded me, the only reason I'm bringing that up is it reminded me of a story. Do you remember Frank from last week, the linebacker from Green
Oh yeah,
Bay?
yeah.
All right, big guy.
Oh yeah.
He was telling us a story. He was telling me and Sandy a story. I think it was when he first started talking to you. He goes, "Yeah, I didn't know." It might have been at the welcome reception or whatever.
We
And
were walking over to the first breakfast. Yeah.
I didn't know who he was or what he did. So I'm telling him about this trip in Colorado, how I'm roughing it and drinking out of the streams, and then you get up on stage.
He came up to me. So Frank, what's Frank's last name? I can't forget. But he played for the Packers with a Super Bowl win, and then for the Chiefs. When they in the last few years. So this guy has played at the highest levels of the NFL. After I gave my initial presentation, he literally came sprinting over to me. He's like, "Dude, you could have helped me out." I was like, "Frank, you didn't say anything that was wrong. You didn't say, you went out and you roughed it. You did." He's like, "Oh man." Funny guy.
Oh yeah, Frank Zombo. So
Zombo, that's right.
Yeah. So, he was a good guy. He told us that we were dying. So, all right. So, listen, once again, you can look up Errol at leader193.com. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you visit movecrushcount.com so you can catch up on all our past episodes and subscribe so you never miss a future one. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram. Join our Facebook group so you can tune into and make sure you tune into all our live streams like today. We do them on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And that way you stay connected with the community. Errol, if you haven't joined our Facebook group, make sure you do so.
I will.
There might be some questions in there that people ask you. You can connect with them. And everybody out there, we don't pay to promote the show. So, all the growth comes organically. So please rate and review us, especially if you feel that 5-star energy. Go into wherever you get your podcast and rate us and review us. But if you could also share this episode and any other ones that you thought were helpful with your friends and family or peers, that would be great. And finally, we want to give special thanks to our sponsor, J&L Marketing, the digital and direct marketing agency that helps you outsmart your toughest competitors so you don't have to outspend them. Visit jnlmarketing.com today so you can see how their innovative approach helps you move the crowd, crush the competition, and count the money. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Move, Crush, Count.